today we're going to be looking a bit at the kind of current trends, if you like. What kinds of things are people doing? And I've got three people from very much different parts of the world who all have, to varying degrees, a kind of hands-on experience this year, this incredible second year, if you like, of generative AI. I'm going to get them to introduce themselves properly in a second, but they are from the Philippines. Hello, Gemma Mendoza, who works for the wonderful, wonderful Rappler, which I'm sure most of you have heard about. If you haven't, go and check it out. It's a brilliant, brilliant editorial newsroom, but also very adept at new technology. From Deutschland, Alessandro Alviani from the Süddeutsche Zeitung. He runs the digital media for them. And from Wales, from lovely Wales, from Cardiff, Clare Spencer, who works for Podmorph. She'll explain what that does, but it works. She's worked for a series, or Podmorph works for a series of other companies over time. So I'm just going to go around to you in the same order very quickly, you guys, just to explain, because you've all got these job titles which didn't exist a few years ago. So just explain, what you do, and if you like, what your company does. Starting with you, Gemma, please.
Hi. Yeah, I actually have a very weird role. So it's digital services, but also I lead research on disinformation and platforms. And part of that is really evolved from our data journalism work. So the data journalism and work with systems like, all the tech platforms that Rappler works on. So that's something that I interface on. But at the same time, knowledge of these platforms by journalists, as well as knowledge of the data by a journalist, also helps with integrating, like looking at ways by which we can integrate these systems within the work that we do to enhance not just the work of journalism, the storytelling, but also civic engagement, which is also a key pillar of Rappler. So yeah, that's pretty much.
And how do you think about yourself, Gemma, and where you've sort of come from? Do you think I'm an editorial journalist, or do you think I'm a tech person who happens to work for a news organization?
Kind of hybrid.
Hybrid, yeah, good. Let's
I
go
don't
with
really
hybrid.
have a job description anymore.
Yeah. Okay, Alessandro, are you a hybrid person?
Yeah,
I mean, Süddeutsche is obviously a fantastic news brand, world renowned. What do you do there?
This is basically, by the way, a fantastic challenge to me as well, because of course the question is, how can we build and deploy Gen AI powered products that are in line with our very high quality standards? So I have a background in journalism and product development, and I'm a former Journalism AI fellow. I was in the very last cohort before ChatGPT was launched. Basically, it was launched, but just 1 week before our Journalism AI festival in 2022. And my role is lead generative AI at the Süddeutsche Zeitung Digitale Medien. It's basically the publishing division of the digital publishing division of the Süddeutsche Zeitung. And I work together with 3 colleagues in our AI core team. And we have basically 2 main goals. First of all, basically developing and building and rolling out Gen AI products. And in order to help the whole organization, not just the editorial teams, to work better and more efficiently. And the second one is basically build products to increase engagement, to boost our digital subscription. So we have been doing a lot of work on this, on creating new Gen AI powered interactive formats, and we can definitely look into it later.
Yeah, I mean, that was a shock to us all, wasn't it? We've spent 2022 working on AI, and then they changed it. They changed AI. Okay, we'll get back to see what you're actually doing. Clare, tell me about what do you do as product manager?
Product manager in this case means I work with a software engineer and a designer in a small team at a company called Overcoat Media, which is an audio production company making audio for people like Radio 4 and World Service. the software engineer, also known as developer, has built the prototype, and now I am testing it on audio producers. So any audio producers who are interested in the idea of giving your audio to a tool which then gives you back an Instagram picture or TikTok video, then now's the time to get in touch with me, because you can test this out with me, and that will mean that you can influence the tool and you can see a glimpse into the future as well.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm going to come back to you, Gemma. And what's fascinating with this panel already is the diversity of the things that you've been talking about that AI might relate to. It goes right through, and also the fact that you're all three different organizations. I suppose you'd say the Süddeutsche was the biggest one, Rappler, though, very, very significant, and obviously Clare, you're technically a very small group of people, but doing great work. So Gemma, just tell us more about what you're actually doing or have been doing this year, especially around generative AI, because there was so much hype about it, that people were talking at the beginning of the year about, is it going to take everyone's jobs? Now we're talking much more about, does it work practically? And if so, how has it worked for you?
Yeah, so the things we've been doing with, I'll start with like what exactly like how we approached generative AI. So Rappler has always been from the get-go very experimental. Whenever we see new tech, it's all about like looking at what this technology can be used for in relation to journalism, in relation to civic engagement, and we're researchers, so part of the work that we do really is all around gathering data. The Philippines is in one of those countries that has a dearth of data, like available data, and part of the work is really about being a pack rat and just gathering what we can gather out there. And a lot of that data is really unstructured data, like really, really badly managed, badly encoded data. So we really have to so the challenge is really like looking at how to make use of these new systems for that, but also like what are the low-hanging fruits that you can use the AI for. So there are two folds. One part of it is really all around the bigger ambitions, like the data build and how we can use that data build. So we've crafted our own ontology. We're building on top of that ontology every time. And that ontology is structuring our knowledge graph. That knowledge graph is how we're connecting with our AI through GraphRag. And we recently released on beta test mode our conversational chatbot, which is one of our key things that we are working on. Like the idea is to surface content that's hiding in a lot of the over hundreds of thousands of stories that Rappler has produced already over the past 10 years, and surface that and make that more usable to our users, at our audience. Now that's part of it. The other part of it is looking at all these different tools that are out there and looking at how we can use it to make the organization more productive. So just one of the things, for instance, where we experimented on is like, how do you use AI for, increasing our video outputs? Because we have a production team, but it's a small production team. So we want to, part of the challenge is like, how do you make our content available in streaming video formats without having to stress our production team more? So that's part of it. It's called the TLDR project that won an AI challenge. And then sorry. Part of that is so content production. The other part of that is we know that what can AI do well, right? Synthesis is one, and we use AI for generating summaries, but also for moderation, and that's one of the experimental works that we've done so far.
just quickly, Gemma, on the two things you mentioned, which obviously it's still early days, but with the chatbot, lots of people are using the chatbot, but also the sort of video editing. What's your first instinct about how well it works?
It's good enough. I mean, like good enough to like, produce. But obviously, like one of the things, the common denominator here is that we never release something just like coming from the AI. You really still need human intervention. You cannot just like release it out in the wild, even for the chatbot. Like we've used quite a lot of ground rules, like behavioral like ways by which we can ground it, ways by which we can control its behavior. But at the end of the day, it's a probabilistic machine. So we need to be conscious of that, and like we look at guardrails.
Great, thanks for that, Gemma. Alessandro, I mean, I spent quite a lot of time talking to German media. Fun enough, there's several German people here at this conference. And on the one hand, people like Süddeutsche Zeitung, you are renowned for having invested a lot in new technology, but there's also a very proud editorial tradition, isn't there, in Germany? So I wonder how much it's been adapted, and also whether it's been adapted at an individual level as well as in terms of tools and products.
I think you touched an extremely important point, and I think when it comes to developing Gen AI products and tools and implementing integrated tools, what we basically think and we pay a lot of attention at is basically make sure that nothing happens top down. So that's why, for example, we started this year a very old AI literacy program, and so far around 500 people, both from the editorial division, from the editorial departments and the publishing division have taken part into those workshops, and we are going to launch AI masterclasses next year to make sure that everyone knows at least how to prompt correctly, how an LLM works, and so on. So AI literacy is extremely important. And then the question we have been following is basically how do we make sure that we can augment our reporting with AI? And give you an example, is our AI assistant for the EU elections a couple of months ago. So basically it's a chatbot. It's a RAG system, and basically we give here users and readers the opportunity to interact with our own content, Süddeutsche Zeitung articles, and content coming from trusted sources and political parties programs that were used for the knowledge base. Why did we use Gen AI for that? Well, we had more than around 30 political parties running for the EU election. It will be overwhelming, both for readers to basically inform and search for information on every single party, and from our editorial teams to report in depth about every single party. So Gen AI is here extremely useful, and we made a huge, really the feedback was extremely good and was extremely positive. And this is something we have been experimenting a lot with. It basically create interactive formats. A second example I can give you is about the idea of reversioning content. A couple of weeks ago, we published an investigative report on shelter workshops. We have thousands of people with disabilities in Germany working shelter workshops. And what we have done here, we basically created three different versions of a story in standard language, and together with the editorial team, from the beginning till the end, we created two different versions in simple. There are two different versions of simple language or plain language in German. One of those was basically created with an orchestration of LLMs, basically an LLM translating this content, the original report, and the second LLM as a proofreader. And we got there as well very positive feedback. And on top of that, we have several tools we have been developing, something like summaries and summarization tools, or tools for our social team to basically help them, support them in creating, for example, carousel posts on Instagram. And maybe just one word on something that it's extremely important to us. And it's not just about creating tools and integrating tools and products, but also developing frameworks. What I mean by frameworks is, first of all, evaluation frameworks. There's a huge need, I think, for evaluating domain-specific evaluation frameworks in journalism. How do we know if, I mean, large language models are getting better and better, and benchmarks are more and more promising, but wait, how do we know if basically a new large language model, a new version is basically useful, this improvement is useful to me? So what we have been doing is a lot of work on a combination of human evaluation and automated evaluation. And second one is basically an improvement, or basically a lot of work on the human in the loop approach. We believe the expert in the loop, we go a step further. We basically, it's not just about the human, but because who's this human in the loop and which kind of expert is or experience does he have or does she have? And basically we think and we try to develop our products focusing on expert in the loop and design principles. We have been working a lot with our designers on design principles for interactive format for Gen AI, and we think there is a huge potential there.
Just to quickly follow up on a couple of things there, Alessandro. Firstly, on the human in the loop, which everyone says, and it's a lovely phrase. You know, we're going to keep the human in the loop, and you know, in practice, what does it mean? But also, if the human has to be in the loop all the time, do you actually get any kind of scalable gains? Do you actually get any? If you're spending all your time checking on the AI, then is the AI going to actually make you more efficient? And the second question, which is related to it, you talked about a kind of framework and so on in terms of evaluation. Was there a wider framework in terms of, I don't know, setting out guidelines, for example, or trying to do training for people?
On the first, I'll give you an example for the first aspect, because I think it's extremely important. Why do we think about the expert in the loop? When we started building prototypes for our summarization tool, we basically created several examples. And one example is about an article we had about the career of a German football player called Pascal Gross, who used to play for 7 years in the Premier League at Albion. And the article, the summary of the article, in the summary, one of the sentences sounded like, before joining the national team, he played for Albion. So basically, according to this summary, he transitioned directly from a club, from Albion, into the German national football team, which is basically, of course, everyone who is a football expert knows this is not possible. It never happened in the history of football. This summary was reviewed by an editor and approved by an editor. Why? Because this editor is not a football expert. So it sounds grammatically and stylistically, it's a perfect summary, but it's wrong. So that's the reason why we think we need a human. And even if it takes a bit longer, but then it's the question, it's a design. And I think, Claire, you know the challenge, it's a design. It's a product design challenge. How do we do I make sure that I basically implement the step in the easiest possible way? For example, straight into the CMS, because everyone is working there. And on the second, maybe just a couple of words on the evaluation. The evaluation, we have been doing a lot, but it's still, I think it's a huge field that is still where there's potential, but it's a lot of experimentation ongoing there. There's a lot of experimentation about frameworks. So we have human evaluation, so human feedback, human checking the results, but still human feedback is expensive, as you mentioned it. It can take a lot of time. It's still prone to biases as well. So we try basically to develop a set of automated metrics. And this is as well a challenge, because the metrics that we used to use in for example, NLP world, they don't really work in the classical LLM world. So this is the challenge we have been working on. And this combination, it works quite well. And still we have been improving it constantly.
Yeah, it's, as they say, an iterative process. Claire, obviously you think you've got a great product, and I'm just interested if you could talk me through how it's implemented, if you like, and the kind of things that people the questions that people ask, the expectations that they have, and how you well, basically how you sell it, but how it actually works in practice.
So how it actually works in practice is a podcaster or an audio producer would upload their audio, and then they'd be suggested some other reversioned content. So there's a key part of this in terms of, well, who is your user? It's something that I've been thinking about a lot. First of all, when we're talking about reversioning content, which Alessandro mentioned, I think one of the key things that has really cemented in my mind this year is that you have to start with high quality content. So as a product, I'm in a situation where I actually want to be really selective about who uses this product. I want to make sure the stuff they are reversioning is accurate in the first place. And then in terms of the expert in the loop, there will be, and I'm nicking that, expert in the loop is so spot on. In terms of expert in the loop, how we see our product being used is by the podcaster who put together that story. So they already have a familiarity, they already did their research, they've already were there interviewing the people, rather than say one person reversioning 20 different stories that day that they don't have any familiarity with, because you'll get exactly what Alessandro described. That's actually really tough unless they'll actually have to consume all to be able to do that factually. They'll have to consume all of the input content that they're reversioning, and then all of the output content. And so if that's just text to text, that's even challenging enough. You need people who are really, really fast readers and then able to spot those differences. And the question that we may start asking more and more, which Charlie, you already hinted at, is, in that circumstance, then, is it more efficient than just doing things from scratch? Is it more efficient using a generative AI? And I think the key is who is the person checking? The person checking is the expert. They can do it really quickly. So what I see for our product is a wider trend of, one, customizing generative AI, because there are people in the industry who do not have the time or the inclination to learn these tools themselves, and so to customize for these specific use cases. And two, this wider trend of only having to say the story once, only having to tell your story once. So then you can tell your story really well in the way that you tell it best. Say if you write 500-word feature articles. Right now, I'm working on podcasts, people who are really good at making audio. But it could be any way you tell your story, and then being able to have help with telling that story in the different ways that you aren't as good at telling. I think that's a really big opportunity we have for generative AI here.
Just stop you there. Just I want to pick up on that a little bit more, because oftentimes people do talk about Gen AI as just something that's going to, I don't know, reversion stuff. That's an intriguing suggestion you made there. That could do things that you couldn't do. What do you mean by that? Or in way you said?
For example, so our podcasters have told us, our audio producers have told us that they don't like making TikTok videos. They don't consume TikTok, so they don't understand the trends, the grammar of it, even the extent of using vertical video, the length, all of that stuff you have to keep, anyway. It's TikTok at the moment, but what will it be in 2 years' time? And there'll be all these other rules, the dimensions, the medium, the kind of the way you communicate in, if it's formal language, informal language on that platform. So whilst somebody who is really good on TikTok may not find our product useful, audio producer who really needs to get some of their audio onto TikTok to widen their audience, because it's really hard to discover podcasts, will find our product useful. to make a TikTok video of, you know, a little excerpt of their podcast.
Exactly. That's really, really interesting. Can I just say to anybody who's listening and watching to this, could you please put any questions you got for the panel into the Q&A, please, rather than into the webinar chat, because it'll get lost in all the other messaging that's going on there. We're already getting some questions in, but before we go to those questions, relatively briefly, can you just, I'm going to ask all three of you the same question, which is, where are we on the sort of the sort of so-called Gartner hype cycle? You know, there was the explosion of rhetoric. Now we're getting down to it. Do you think that it's now a kind of incremental upward path, or do you expect more surprises? Starting with you, Gemma.
Well, I think there's a realization here that this is not plug and play. It's not like you can just, you know, bring in the AI and it's gonna do wonderful stuff, you know. You really need a little bit of preparation, both for the newsroom itself and also for your system. So the newsroom needs to understand AI. They're both in terms of its limitations and what it can do and cannot do. The other thing is, like, even for when you are building your own systems, you know that the data itself, the AI itself is only as good as what data you feed it. I mean, it's been said, like, human in the loop at the end of the day starts with verification, needs to be initially done very often by humans, and you start with content that you can trust to begin with, and not just any content out there. So those are some of the things that, like, really we're seeing now. It's not something you can just play with. It can do a lot of things that are that could improve workflows, improve productivity, but yeah, there's quite a lot that needs to be there. You need to have a policy, and that's one of the things we started with.
Yeah. So Alessandro, you know, I'm sure you haven't got much spare time on your hands, and I'm sure you've got plenty to be getting on with. But do you have, I mean, literally any kind of projects that you're thinking of for sort of 6-12 months hence, or are there kind of areas that you think are going to open up?
I think there are areas I see where I see huge potential, and I think Claire mentioned the topic audio. I think in audio we haven't seen, and it's not just about notebook LM. There are way more possibilities to interact with content, and there I definitely see much potential. I think that the trends towards smaller large language models is extremely interesting to us. And there are still, I think there are, I personally think that there's one field that is, let's say, underdeveloped yet, and is basically design or interaction interfaces for GenAI content. I think the chatbot interface is great, but still it can be limiting for a lot of people who basically don't know what to type into. And there are some, if we think it further, and that's why I think there's huge potential in modular journalism, we have possibilities and huge opportunities to start rethinking content and the way we deliver content in a totally different way, how we structure content. And even if we think it even further, there's this huge, extremely interesting field of Gen UI, of user interfaces that are generative AI powered. And there, I think there's, if you start thinking and combining this with personalization, then there's still huge potential. And I think, Claire, you mentioned, and there's the question, how do we make sure that we basically the people who are experts can double check the content that comes from GenAI, from LLMs even faster? There's a sentence in a report from the Associated Press from several months ago about the lack of interfaces to support journalists in doing that. And you see, there's still, how do we do that? Do we highlight maybe if you have original content and you have a Gen AI augmented piece of content? Do we highlight? How do we basically guide? The question of guidance, that's why I think there's huge potential in the design principles for AI in journalism. How do we guide? How do we support our journalists in who are basically working with that?
Of course, it was the modular journalism that you were working with us, which was very, very prescient. And I do think there is this potential that we're, at the moment, isn't it, Claire? We're focusing on products quite rightly, or we're focusing on tools that can help individual journalists. But at some point, this is restructuring. And chatbots are a great example, aren't they? That suddenly, not only can the audience ask questions and find out things for themselves, but you can find out what they're really interested in, which to me sounds like a really cool thing to know.
And we've seen it in. Oh, sorry, Claire.
No, go ahead.
Just a quick note on that. As for our EU elections vote, we basically we saw that most of the questions that we answered, or the tool answered, were basically pre-suggested questions. Were not, they're basically suggestions that are basically coming from the interaction, and you get, if you start interacting with the tool, you get basically questions suggested, and you can basically click on that, rather than questions that were typed by users of this tool.
You go ahead, Claire. Where are we at? What's happening there?
That just leads me to get quite excited about the possibility of the audience being able to consume the content in the way that suits them, rather than in the way that we find it easiest to tell them to. So I think that is a fundamental, that's wider than the newsroom. We're going to see this potential with generative AI to allow for that. And a really small example from this year that I got really excited about was that WhatsApp rolled out the feature where they transcribe your voice notes. So in that circumstance, the person sending the message sends it in the most convenient way for them, and the person receiving it can receive it in either, whichever way of those two is more convenient. I think that, for news, that is really exciting, because in the end what we want to do is be able to inform people and educate them about the changes going on in their lives, so they can make decisions that they might need to make, and anything that can help break down the barrier between the journalists and the audience, I think is an exciting new thing, as long as, whilst bearing in mind the major flaw of generative AI, which kind of makes it comedic for the news industry, is that it adds in errors. And so then it's sometimes like, it's like, if it didn't add in errors, it would be extraordinary. Well, I can't imagine what 2025 would be, but that added like little twist to the story has really made it more challenging and kind of interesting, I guess, for us. Like, how do we make sure, how do we mitigate against that? Well, how do we get the full potential of this whilst mitigating against a very crucial risk to us as people who want to pass on factually accurate information?
Yeah, exactly. So let's go to those questions from the audience. Tons of them in the Q&A, so let's try and crash through quite a few if we can. Here's one directly to you, Alessandro, from Marco. He's asking, did you create detailed personas for the prompts when reversioning content for different language versions, or did you give examples of the target versions for training the models?
Very briefly on this, we basically use the plain language, so-called einfache Sprache in German, is not defined by very strict rules, but there are some recommendations for that, like shorter sentences or easier sentences and writing active and so on. So basically the idea here was to work with a very complex and very long prompt, and in second step to work with an orchestration. So basically the tool got the role of an expert in einfache Sprache, additionally got in the first step a very long list of rules, and in the second step again in this orchestration of different LLM, very important, with similar rules, was tasked to basically double check it.
Yeah. And Gemma, can I ask you a broader question, which is, I mean, it's a silly one, really. I think you alluded to this. You talked about human in the loop and so on, and checking and so on. But are there functions for generative AI or AI where you can just let it do it all? You know, perhaps it's supplementary activities or revenue activities where it is purely automated and that you don't really need an expert in the loop.
Well, it seems to be good at summaries, and
Right.
so we haven't gotten any complaints about summaries on our site. It's good at moderation. Like, so one of the experiments we did was we prompted the AI to like act as the moderator in a focused group discussion, and there's now a variation to that where it's actually interviewing. So we prompted it to ask to act as somebody probing for information about a particular subject matter, and it's able to do that. So this is actually something we implemented both for consultations around AI as well as consultations around real world subject matters. Like, for example, very recently, our community engagement team worked with a local government around a consultation on whether a policy is acceptable, or like what would make it acceptable, like what are the things that need to be adopted in order to make this policy of pedestrianizing one of the very busy streets in Metro Manila. And what the local government we worked with appreciated about it is that like it was able to enable them to ask like, unlike a usual survey, it's able to ask like open-ended questions, which means like you're really getting ideas, and AI is both qualitative and quantitative. So you're basically like getting as like real time, like a synthesis of the conversation that's going on. So that became inputs to the policy of the local government. Now, what else? The AI to the text to video is fairly good already. But yeah, sometimes again, it's really all dependent on how the inputs you are, or like what is the state of the inputs you're giving? Like, are the materials, the assets you're giving the AI labeled properly, right? And by labeled properly, every entity within a photo, are they labeled right? Because otherwise they'll make mistakes. Because the better your data is, the better the AI will be, the better structured. But that's a lot of work and a lot of investments.
I love the consultation example because it shows you that you're doing something that you perhaps didn't do before, you know, that, and some things they're not about, I don't know, the truth. Somebody having an opinion isn't, you can't fact check somebody's opinion in that sense. And I suppose there's also an element of some things are less risky than others. My favorite example is somebody who said that the one thing they never worry about using AI for is horoscopes, because you can't fact check a horoscope.
Or quizzes.
That's right. Or quizzes, exactly. There's a question here for Claire from Sophia Smith-Gaylor, who knows quite a bit about doing TikTok. And she just said she'd like to hear from you, Claire, what the results the producers have had so far in testing with, you know, Instagram posts or TikTok videos. You know, what exactly is the software creating, and how do they tell the AI what's needed to perform? I suppose in that sense, do you have you have sort of templates and so on?
So we upload the audio, make a transcript, use summarization, generative AI summarization to summarize, to extract quotes, and then you as the user can choose a quote that you like from, say, 1 hour of audio. And then we make a quote tile, so it says the quote, and that you can hear the audio at the same time. And there's picture which is related to the subject in the background, and it's an illustration. We had some issues with hyper-real generative AI tools want to create hyper-real images. We just want illustrations which are clear that they're not anything real. And the same for the TikTok video. It's a vertical. So it's essentially a quote from the podcast, but it's been selected. But you can choose, and you can carry on. It gives you 4 choices at first of quotes, and if you don't like those ones, you can carry on and carry on. You can also check. We also have functionality where you can check against the original audio to make sure the quote is correct. Yeah, so that's what we have at the moment. Gemma, our experimentation with generative video was far less successful than yours. There's so many different generative video tools out there, so we're plugging in different tools into our things so that our podcasters don't have to think about this stuff. And
we had to make sure it's still reviewed, so it's you
but
can't
some of the content coming out of some of them is just kind of useless for us, and that's I guess the challenge we have is finding we've been given, oh, now this is technically possible, and we're now trying to find a use. It should be the other way around, but here we are. So so I'm really looking forward to in 2025, because we're waiting for, we know, Sora, we're waiting for general release on that, OpenAI's generative AI, and we're waiting for general release on Google Vids. I'm not in the Google Labs group. Who is anyone in the Google Labs group, by the way? Because if you are, contact me. And as in the people who are allowed to test it really early on. So I'm waiting for those and a couple of other the big guys coming out with their generative video stuff, because at the moment it's just lots and lots of different small guys coming up with generative video, and it's variable quality, and we really struggled with, well, can we actually use this for what we want to do, which is essentially make video where video doesn't exist. So the podcasters haven't filmed, they need to put stuff on TikTok. So what can we make so that they can put stuff on TikTok?
Yeah, and it'd be fascinating to see the pace of change. I mean, some of it is much more, I mean, perhaps it won't be exponential, but if it just makes it 10% better, that could be the difference between using a tool and not using a tool. I'm going to end, we've got about 5 minutes left. I'm going to ask all 3 of you. There's a couple of questions which sort of come around a similar topic, really. One from Pina Debbie, who talks about what skills, how many and which skills do we need to acquire, or indeed, are we just going to be operating on some sort of AI hamster wheel? We suddenly don't need any skills at all. And a related question from Callum Bannister, who says, with AI advancing in news presentation, do you see journalists adapting their roles to incorporate these technologies, or do you expect new positions to emerge to explore this area? I'm guessing this is already happening, isn't it, Gemma?
Well, yeah, our news, so some will be like, some will adapt more than others. There are those who will experiment more than others. It's not for everybody, but yeah, skills wise, I think we do encourage people to like study a little bit of prompt engineering. It's pretty much like asking the right questions essentially of the AI. A big part of it really is like, it all depends on what level of, like, at what level you want to engage on AI, right? Like, if you want to do more with AI, it's very important that you like think about like the data infrastructure that could power really good a better AI than just the usual stuff. If you, but the bare bones is really that little bit of prompt engineering, basically journalists asking the right questions.
Alessandro.
Totally agree on that. Product development basics, I think this is so important to always ask, which kind of problem are we do we want to address with this shiny AI that we would like to develop or implement. I think this is extremely important, and having the flexibility to test, and then at the end also to say no, that this doesn't fit because it doesn't meet the bar we have, is extremely important.
Yeah. Claire.
So I can't remember the first question, but I'm going to answer where do journalists fit in?
They're both around sort of skills and, you know.
So where I think journalists fit in, for where we have generative AI at the moment, is what Alessandro said before about evaluation frameworks, right? So we as journalists are able to evaluate the quality of the output of generative AI. It's subjective, but we're experienced in knowing about the quality of content, what is good quality, what is bad quality, and we are skilled in being able to do that. It would be really cool if we shared our knowledge, because it's quite a high labor. All this stuff seems to be labor intensive, doesn't it? It's quite a labor intensive task, that. And in terms of skills or specific jobs, so spoiler alert, so Callum, I actually used to manage Callum. He is an AI assisted reporter at NewsQuest, and I was his manager. And so there, what they did is they brought in people and taught them the AI skills. And I think that was indicative of the time we were in that we had this really tricky human resources issue that people needed to know before they used anything, the risks and the flaws of these products. So we needed to be assured, if you are going to have a human in the loop, that they also understand that no fact is safe when it comes to generative AI, and when they are editing output from generative AI, that they have that in mind. It's completely different to sub-editing a person. There's a subtle nuance between this and sub-editing a person who, they'll get spelling mistakes and punctuation incorrect. They might spell someone's name wrong. Whereas this will actually take, if you use something like OpenAI's GPT-4, it will take the first name of one person and the second name of another, put them together, or take an accusation against one person and put it against the name of another person mentioned in the same thing. So, so the people in that team had to be really aware of that. But I think that's probably, as time goes on, the probably what's best is a general newsroom population understand those flaws and work within that, and then we won't need specific teams that use generative AI, but each journalist will use it. There will be people who are like experts, but each journalist will be using generative AI rather than being banned from it unless you're in this team. Also because the truth is that journalists are using maybe generative AI without permission. So we need to make sure that they're trained and understand the risks when they do use it.
Exactly.
And understand that they are responsible in the end for the content.
And they may even be using it without knowing they are. They'll be. I talk to journalists and I say, "Do you use AI?" And they say, "Absolutely no way would I go near that thing." And then they say, "Oh, but I'm using this transcription thing. It's really good," or "I'm using it to translate text or to go through to summarize a research document or something." So yes, it's all evolving. Listen, you three, that was absolutely fantastic. Really, really wonderful. Such interesting related viewpoints and experiences, and obviously a lot of variety and difference between what you're all doing. I wish you all the best for 2025. Please keep in touch. Let's keep talking, and thank you for all the great questions from the audience.